And you've just heard Birdies, the title track from the debut album by Microwave 60. And I'm joined now by the main man behind Microwave 60, Gerry Campbell. Hello, Gerry.
Hi, Ali. How you doing?
I'm really well. And before we talk about Birdies, the album, tell us about that song.
That song, it's an interesting one. It had a long evolution, that song. Started off as just a piece of music that I was working on and that I developed. And it was one of those ideas that was quite far on, but not finished. It was a musical idea that was quite developed. And it sat on my hard drive on my computer for about 10 years.
Wow.
And one day I was going through some things that I had been working on, and that was one of them. And I was like, I need to do something with this idea. I loved the atmosphere of it, but I didn't know what words were going to be on it lyrically. So what I often do in that situation is I'll sit with a piece of music on a loop and just flick through my notebooks and see if there's anything that looks like it's going to fit. And I had this set of lyrics that I had written, which ultimately became the lyrics for Birdies. And when I wrote the lyrics, I didn't have them in mind for that piece of music. So it was just a kind of a nice bit of serendipity that the text matched up with what I was hearing in my ears that day. And all of a sudden, after 10 years of that piece of music existing, suddenly it was clear to me what to do with it.
And when do you decide that that's going to be the title track?
Well, that's an interesting thing because, well, there's an important thing to say about all of the songs on the album, which is that they were all written over a kind of 10-year period between about 2009 and 2019. And there wasn't any big concept or anything behind the idea of calling the album Birdies. It's just that Birdies kind of popped up in a couple of places in lyrics. So there's a track, The Lovers, on the album, which talks about that. And I started thinking of Birdies as just a kind of nice metaphor for us humans and what we're doing in life. And so the kind of idea of calling the album Birdies was more just an observation about all of us kind of flitting and flying around and what we think we're doing.
Because you've lent into the imagery. The album cover, for instance, has got birdies on it. And also there's been, I know when you've been kind of promoting the album or at least kind of prefacing it, there's been images of birds used in it. So that's something you kind of embrace.
Yeah. So for a long time, I've enjoyed wee relationships with birdies. My favourite ones are actually blackbirds. You can have a conversation with a blackbird, I realised many years ago. And I've done this a few times, where if you're outdoors and you hear a blackbird singing, then usually they're singing quite simple little melodic phrases. And they are melodic. They're often in major and minor keys. They kind of correspond to what Western music sounds like. And what I like to do is if I hear a blackbird singing and it's doing a repeated melodic phrase, I repeat that phrase back to it, whistle it back. And then you kind of get this and it'll sing it to you, I'll sing it to it. And then what I do is I change one note.
Right.
And what you hear then is the birdie doing its original phrase, but with a little warble in it, where you change the note, and then you repeat it, and then it has another go at it, and eventually it gets it. So I quite like. I've done this a few times with birds. It was there was one place one place that I used to stay where I always went outside to smoke.
Mm-hmm.
Bad habit, don't take it up, kids. But that was what I used to do, and there were lots of birds round about, and that was when I got into having these wee conversations with the blackbirds. So they're my favourite ones. I can't even remember what your question is now, but it's
it was just
the
an
theme of
observation
birdies
that you've lent into birdies, and you have just proved that with that answer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's interesting. So the album, you've been kind of working on these tracks and these songs for 10 years, for about a decade.
No, what I did was over that 10-year period, I just made kind of demo recordings of those tracks as I was writing them. And obviously they're not the only songs that I wrote over that 10-year period, but all the songs that are on the album, I always, by the time I got to about 2019, I was kind of thinking of those songs as a bunch of songs that went well together. They've got some themes in common.
Yeah.
So birdies are in there. There's things like, how permanent things are and how impermanent things are. Things coming and going is a theme in the album as well. Fashions coming and going is a theme on the album as well. So I think that was probably, on some level, I was trying to figure out in life what's permanent, what's always there, and what are the things that are just here for now, but they might be gone a bit later. What's important to take with you and keep with you, and what can you let go and shed as you go through life.
And as you are beginning to whittle down the songs that are going to be on the final record, do you have the themes in mind? Do you think that would fit in there, or do they just emerge?
The themes do just emerge, because lyrically, most of the time, I feel like I'm just kind of groping around in the dark. Often I find what I'm trying to do with lyrics is just, I tend not to worry about meaning too much. I'm often looking for things to be in a certain rhythm, or for the words to have certain sounds in them. So I often find that I'm looking for particular vowel sounds and particular consonants, because the first thing that you hear before you've tuned into the words in a song, you get the overall kind of feeling of the song, what it sounds like, what kind of noises it makes. And so a lot of the time I'm looking for words that have got certain sounds in them. And so the meaning's always a secondary thing. So, there was no big calculated plan for this album thematically. But on the basis that all expression is self-expression, you can rely on the fact that by the time you get to the end of it, you'll have said some things, you'll have made some choices and said some things that express something. And it's interesting how, even though I feel like I'm groping around in the dark for lyrics and working with sounds a lot of the time and rhythms, at the end of it, there are themes that keep coming back. And so, yeah. But the important thing to say about songs just in general is all of these songs, they're just made up. They're not even real songs. I just made them up. And that sounds flippant, but, I think I've probably got a tendency, like a lot of people who are fans of music, to think that songs by whoever your favorite songwriters are these golden cultural artifacts that arrive fully formed into the lap of Paul McCartney or Neil Young or Cole Porter or George Gershwin or whoever it is whose songs you love. And I was talking, actually, I had a great conversation with fellow Bellshill songwriter Martin Henry just recently about just that. I was talking about the Peter Jackson Beatles film, Get Back, from a few years ago, and how, you think about a song like Get Back and it feels like it's always existed and it's perfect and it must have just arrived in that form and it's a solid gold cultural artifact. But what that film shows you really clearly is that they had nothing. They started, McCartney sitting there with his bass playing a 12-bar blues, and George Harrison and Ringo Starr are kind of sitting listlessly next to him.
Yeah.
And he starts coming, you see him before your very eyes pulling the idea out of thin air. It starts with nothing. And there's a point where he breaks away from that 12-bar blues and starts doing something that sounds more like what Get Back is going to eventually be. And George Harrison's ears prick up. And it shows you that this, what you think of as a solid gold cultural artifact that maybe arrived fully formed, it's nothing of the sort. It was a series of decisions, and it was lots of trying the idea out. You see him and Lennon eventually sitting across from each other, trying out, like doing it in funny accents, trying out alternative lyrics. And there's this kind of playfulness about how they go about it. And so over the course of that, it was a series, wasn't it? It was like there was a few episodes of it. So over the course of those hours, you hear that song in loads and loads of different forms. And then at the end of it, they're up on the roof. They're doing that famous gig up on the roof, and you're rooting for them like they're underdogs because you've seen what they've gone through to get to pull these ideas out and make something out of nothing. And I found that really inspiring because I'm like, well, that's kind of what I do. You start with, I mean, I don't make solid gold cultural artifacts. I'm not comparing myself to Paul McCartney, but in the sense that you start off with nothing, and at the end of it, once you've made some decisions, you have something. And that, for me, that's a magical thing to be involved in.
That's an interesting example, because McCartney has the rest of the Beatles, and Microwave 60 isn't just yourself, even though you're the driving force. Kind of who else is involved, and how much are they involved?
So there's a couple other people who are involved in it. So on the album, there's my brother Brian, and he plays bass guitar on "Here Is the Place." And he originally came up with the bass line for that song back in 2009. It was him who played on it. He used to play in the band that we had together. And so it made sense to get him back in to do the bass line because it was his. And he asked me, he said, why did you ask me? You could have played that on the bass. Why did you ask me to come and do it? And I was like, well, for the same reason that people used to get Steve Gadd to come in and play the drums on their tracks, because it only sounds like that when he does it. And it's the same thing. It only sounds like that when he plays that line. So he did that. And then We Were Fire, which I think we're going to hear, was started off as an idea by my friend Antoine Rousseau. And he's the cousin of my French friend, and we met when I was over in France on holiday. And the first time we met each other, he turned up with a little melodica, you know, this little keyboard that you blow into, and it sounds a bit like an accordion. And there was a guitar, and we were just talking about music and what music we loved. And we're both big fans of Serge Gainsbourg, it turns out.
Right.
So during those holidays, we ended up doing a little gig at the local bar down the street together. We spent a few days just, you know, with the guitar and the melodica, working out a set of, it was a really bizarre set of Serge Gainsbourg, Edith Piaf, Nino Ferrer, some French artists, but also Radiohead and the Beatles and things. So during the summer holidays, and it was lovely. And that was the start of something really nice. He comes up with these, I call them atmospheres. And We Were Fire was one of those. He had already written this piece for piano and melodica. And he sent a rough demo of that over to me, and I put words on it, and I wrote the melody for it, and I restructured it a bit and built up the arrangement around it. And that ended up being We Were Fire. And there's also Johnny Cola. Now, Johnny Cola is a living legend. If you don't already know about Johnny Cola and the A grades, go and check them out. Their stuff's up. I'm sure it's on Bandcamp, and it's probably on the streaming platforms as well. Right. And he was up visiting. We used to work together, actually. And we became good pals because we're both in bands and playing music. And he was up visiting, and he came up with he was playing around with one of my old vintage mono synths and came up with a synth idea. And we began writing a song which became Flags on the album. So we started off working on that together. And then I kind of pounced on it and and kept working on it and finished it on my own. So those are the main people. It'd be my brother Brian, Antoine, who's now in Thailand. Weirdly, he's off playing piano in restaurants in Thailand, and Johnny Cola. So it's not, you know, like I did a lot of it. I was able to do myself in terms of playing the instruments and so forth. But like all good projects, it's never just you on your own, you know. So Johnny Cola and the A grades, check that out. Their other thing is Jukebox Headaches, which is also worth checking out. I'm putting links on this to this up on my social media and Bandcamp and stuff, because I think they're terrific. They're super talented. Because the other guy who's in Jukebox Headaches is Jez Leather, who's Johnny's collaborator. You see this, there's like, I'm not even sure I know their proper names.
I was going to say, like, Johnny Cola and Jez Leather. I mean, it really is something else.
Oh, yeah, totally. In that kind of tradition of glam rock and punk rock, where you have another name, and they're very much that. But when it came to mixing the album, I started making these, you know, tidier recordings. I had like really rough demos of the songs as I was writing them between 2009 and 2019. But I was listening to them. I thought, I'd really like to put this out, but I can't put it out in this form. So I began re-recording it and doing a better job of it and stuff like that. But as I started to mix it, I was like, my mixing is rubbish. And I think it's, you know, it's worthwhile holding your hands up sometimes when you realize that you're not, you know, you've not got one of the skills that you need, and find someone who can kind of fill in that gap for you and help you out. So Johnny's collaborator, Jez, agreed to do the mixing of the album for me. So I, wonders of the internet, I sent all the individual tracks to him online, and along with my rough mix of it, which is like a pencil sketch, and he would send me back these beautiful 3D model mixes of it, where it sounded, you know, it was all Technicolor and took up a beautiful space and jumped out the speakers at you and stuff like that. And honestly, every time he sent me a mix, I started calling it musical Christmas, because it was like Christmas morning every time. You know, I recognized things that I had done, but it was just transformational. Such a talent. And I think I wanted him to mix it because, first and foremost, he's a musician.
Yeah.
He doesn't have any formal training in sound engineering. And so he comes at it from that perspective of someone who writes and performs and records his own stuff and produces other people's stuff. And what a transformation. It was the best decision I made about it, I think, was getting Jez involved. So yeah, there's this nice kind of, the lovely thing is when you make things and you do things like creative things, you meet other people who do that. And I'm very lucky that I've got a kind of group of people around me who are super talented and who I can call in to haul in. I was about to say, like, come on in, help, to help me out with things. And it's just a brilliant thing.
And that's interesting to hear. And also, earlier on, you were saying you weren't too bothered about the lyrics. It was the vowel sounds. No. We're also talking about listening to the birds. And it's because musically, this is really rich, I think. And I'm interested in the influences on the album, because they feel quite eclectic and probably go beyond just this band or that musician or something.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, I think hopefully the influences on it there'll be wee bits where you could pick out maybe this artist or that artist, but hopefully at this stage all of that stuff has soaked in so much that it's kind of well synthesized and doesn't come out in obvious ways. I think when you're, you know, definitely as a young person, when I started writing songs, that you're inspired by the things that you love. And the first thing that you do is you try to make things that sound like the things that you love. So inevitably you end up wearing your influences on your sleeve. And I definitely did that, you know. In terms of what's on this album, well, it's probably all in there. You know, the big influences for me were, in terms of the ones that people would immediately know, it'll be things like Neil Young, Pixies. A huge one for me is Prefab Sprout.
Yeah.
Because I was just the right age in the late 80s. I was in my kind of mid-teens when there's 3 wonderful albums by them. There's Steve McQueen, From Langley Park to Memphis, and Jordan the Comeback. Yeah. And what grabbed me in was the melodic sense that Paddy McAloon has as a writer. His tunes are just swoon-inducing, gorgeous. But also the breadth of creativity in terms of what a pop song could be about.
Yeah.
There's one of the albums where he variously adopts the voices of God, of Elvis Presley, of Jesse James, and this just blew my mind that you could have that kind of fun in a pop song. So definitely that's a huge influence and continues to be. You know, he set a very high bar that you know you could have a go at getting somewhere near that, but you know, like aim for the sun, you might aim for the stars, you might get the moon, I guess. You know,
when I first heard this first single, "The Lovers," I thought there was a nod to the theme to BBC Golf. Now, I was at the time, and you kind of went, "Yes, it is." And I don't know whether you were just, you know, humouring me or not.
Not at all. No, do you know? I think you managed to put your finger on it in a way that I didn't quite. When I came up with the idea, I think it's to do with the synthesizer line on it. It's in fact, even more specifically, it's the bridge between the verses and the choruses. has this synthesizer line on it. And I remember thinking there was something a bit, I don't know if it was Ski Sunday or, you know, just that certain point in time in the late 70s or early 80s where on the BBC, they tended not to write original theme music. They often just used obscure album tracks by prog rock artists and stuff like that for programs on the telly. So that meant that sometimes the theme music for TV programs was really interesting. And definitely that the Lovers had something of that, but you kind of like pinned, and I know exactly the golf theme tune that you were meaning. I'm like, that's the one, that's it. It's got a similar feel, it's got a similar arrangement, and there's a kind of natty synth going on in the middle of it. So yeah.
Now, you and I have known each other for a wee while, and I knew you had a kind of musical backstory, but I never went into any details with you. But I feel since we're chatting now, it might be nice to do so. You know, who and when you were in a kind of different bands over the years.
Okay, yeah. So my own band was Baby God. And we were active kind of like 2003 to kind of 2009 probably. And, you know, we did lots of gigs and we made films and videos and kind of put on our own. We had this idea of doing kind of indie cabaret nights. And again, this thing about when you make things, you meet other people who make things. Well, we just, you know, we knew kind of performance poets and other musicians and DJs and things like that. And we were making these films and things. And we thought, well, what if we started putting on nights that just showcased that?
Yeah.
One of our performance poet pals, Wendy Miller, a very talented writer, because she had that background in presenting and performing, she compared the nights for us. So that was one of the kind of interesting things that we did, was try to do these. It was good. We would advertise them so this would be maybe around about 2005, 2006. We would advertise them online, and we would make sure that they got in the listings in certain magazines, and people came along. It was wonderful. So there was a bit of an appetite for it, but we had some wonderful guests. You know, we had, I remember when we met De Rosa, again, Martin Henry's come up again. He's such a talent. I find it hard to stop talking about him, but we had met them on, remember, MySpace, which was brilliant in the kind of early 2000s. We met on there. Turns out we're both from Bells Hill. We went to the same high school, but not at the same time.
Yeah.
And we invited them to come along and play at one of these cabaret nights that we put on. And I remember standing at the back of the room, just kind of watching the audience while they were playing, and just watching people mouthing disbelieving obscenities at each other at what they were hearing. It was just like, lots of people just doing that. And I think that was lots of people's reaction to hearing that band. So that was one element of what I did in the past. But I mean, I played for other people as well. Like we met up recently. Let's mention Martin Henry again. Like a few weeks ago, we were both at the Glad Cafe to see his gig, and I was trying to sketch out a little bit of the family tree for you. So there's a Bells Hill connection with Martin. Obviously, that means that there's, you know, if you were to draw the family tree, that would also involve Teenage Fan Club, the BMX Bandits, and Sheena Easton. If we're going to do the Soup Dragons, let's not forget, members of Mogwai and stuff like that. But at that gig, our mutual pal Catherine Joseph was there, and so both of us, we met like 20 years ago or more. When we were both involved with a Creep and Bent band called Scientific Support Department. And we were both enslaved for several months by Brian Docherty, who's the guy behind Scientific Support. And he had an album coming out at that time. Catherine had played on it, and I was helping out live. And so I've always enjoyed these kind of things where, you know, you put your own ego to one side somewhat, and you facilitate what someone else is doing. So played with lots of different people. You know, there was a point where I was playing for Lorraine McIntosh from Deacon Blue.
Yeah.
Kind of living legends of Scottish rock. And Lorraine was working with Brian from Scientific Support Department on some solo songs.
Right, okay.
And we did a few gigs, and the band was called Cub, and that was enormous fun. I kind of got to know Brian a bit better musically, being involved in that, and got to spend time working with Lorraine. Obviously, she's very talented. And so I enjoy these things where I can, be more of a side guy or a background guy and just sit and play the keyboards,
So is that one of the reasons it's Microwave 60 and not Gerry Campbell?
Yeah, kind of. Like, I don't, Gerry Campbell and his enormous, great big ego, it was all me, da, 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 da. It doesn't sit well with me. I kind of prefer, part of it as well was I've recently got really into an American band. I'm going to say band, but actually it's a guy. Youth Lagoon. Now,
right.
If you haven't listened to Youth Lagoon, people, just go onto YouTube right now and look up Youth Lagoon. Listen to anything, stick a pin in it anywhere, and you're going to land on something brilliant. And essentially it's just one guy. It's Trevor Powers, but he uses the name Youth Lagoon, and I quite like that. It suggests a band because, like anyone else, he does a lot of stuff himself, but he needs help from other people, so he brings other people in. But essentially, he's kind of at the middle of it. So I don't know. Like Gerry Campbell's not a very exciting name either. It's not like Johnny Cole or maybe I should get myself one of those names.
I think that's something to think about, Gerry. Definitely.
Yeah, get myself a glam rock name. I should have. Yeah. So yeah, I preferred the idea of putting it out as something that kind of wasn't just about me.
We're going to hear my current favourite song on the album in a moment, We Were Fire. But are there any plans to play live?
Do you know, a couple of people have asked about it, and at the moment, no, and kind of yes. I'm thinking about it. It took so long to make the album, and then, like getting it to the stage of being ready to go out, and then all the stuff that you do around it actually going out, that I haven't had time to think about. Like I've had a go at, I was thinking maybe some stripped down acoustic gigs would be a good idea, but as people will realise when they hear the album, there's a lot going on in the arrangements, and it's quite hard to strip some of it down, much as I would like to. So I had a bit of a go at that over the Christmas holidays, and was just thinking, I don't think it's going to work this way. So either I put together a 6-piece band where everybody's singing and playing an instrument, and that's a tall order, or I just keep working on the cloning machine and make 5 other Gerrys, and we go out, and that would be funny or horrific, or I don't know, like what would happen if they went rogue? I don't know. So maybe I will, but no immediate plans for it.
Gerry, it's always great to talk to you. Thanks very much for taking the time to do it.
Absolute pleasure, Ali. Thanks for having me on. Great show.
And this is Microwave 60, and We Were Fire.